بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد صلاة تحيا بها وروحي وتنشط بها جواره ويقع بها قلبي ويسري سرها في ولادي وأهلي وأصحابي وأكون بها سعيد ومسعود. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد فاتح لما أغلق وخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق وهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آل حق قدره مقدار عظيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So just to continue on from our last sitting, we mentioned regards to a saying by Sayyidina Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq radiyallahu anhu, and I said that his father was Sayyidina Muhammad Baqir, and the father of Sayyidina Muhammad Baqir was Sayyidina Imam Zain al-Abidin, and Zain al-Abidin's father was Sayyidina Imam Hussein, and Sayyidina Imam Hussein's mother was actually a Persian princess. Imam Hussein's wife was a princess, a Persian princess, and Sayyidina Imam Hussein, he is the son of Lady Fatima alayhi salam. And actually the head of the 𝗿𝗲𝗴𝘂𝗂𝗿 is not Sayyidina Imam Ali, it's actually Fatima alayhi salam. She's actually the head of the 𝗿𝗲𝗴𝘂𝗂𝗿. So Sayyidina Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq radiyallahu, and obviously his son is Sayyidina Ali Uraydi, and then you have his grandson is Sayyidina Ahmad ibn Isa Muhajir, who took the 𝗿𝗲𝗴𝘂𝗂𝗿 minhaj to Hadramaut in Tarim, where you have the likes of al-Saqaf family. This is one of Sayyid Saqaf, not this one here, the next one. The first Saqaf of the Rahman Saqaf, he had like 10 children, and from that we have the likes of al-Haddad and Saqaf and Atas and Idrus and so on. But he says something very beautiful, Sayyidina Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq. He said, "In Allah Ta'ala khaba'a thalathin fi thalatha." That indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has hidden 3 in 3. We said last time. In Allah ta'ala khaba'a thalathin fi thalathin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has hidden 3 in 3. So he says khaba'a, that the first one, he says that it is khaba'a in his obedience, in ta'atihi. That there's rida, there's contentment of Allah, there's a pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in what? In obeying Him. Obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will find His pleasure. And he says, فَلَا تُحَقِّرَنَّ. So don't undermine it. Don't undervalue something. And one thing we tend to do is that every day we're supposed to be doing this, but we tend to rush it. And this is called wudu. What we call in Urdu wuzu, right? But wudu the word is from light, from nur. But we tend to really rush it. Whereas if we really look at wudu, it really has a massive spiritual impact on you if you do it properly. We tend to do it quickly and rush because you want to get the wudu out the way, and then you want to get the prayer out the way. But if you really, really bring yourself, bring your mind, and bring your heart, and bring your soul, bring yourself in that moment when you're doing wudu for that point. So for example, when you're doing wudu and you wash your face, Sayyidina Muhammad said, "Ahsana," whoever does proper wudu, like beautiful wudu, his sins will just flow out. So if you see haram, if you've seen something you should not have seen, and you do wudu properly, you make the intention, Ya Rab, what these eyes have seen, remove this by the barakah of the wudu. And when you put water of wudu in your mouth, and you may have sworn, or may you have said something wrong, you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the barakah of wudu to remove that when you do this. So you're bringing mind, or you touch something that was not yours, or was haram for you to touch. And you touch, you do wudu, Ya Rab, remove this, anything that I should not have touched, And the same way with the ears, you heard something you shouldn't have heard, you make a niyyah. And you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, I don't know how to make proper niyyah when I do wudu. So I want the niyyah of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the niyyah he had when he did wudu. I want that niyyah. I want the niyyah of when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Habib sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he prayed, I want that intention. That's the niyyah I want to have. And if you do that for 40 days, like you bring that to yourself, that you bring wudu live, you will see wonders. There was a young man in Iraq, he was in the main masjid, and as he was walking in, there's a wudu area and he starts to do wudu. And as he's doing wudu, the water is coming off his limbs, and in walks in Sayyidina Imam Abu Hanifa, rahmatullahi ta'ala, and he walks in and he starts to do wudu. And he looks at the boy, the young man, and he says to him, he sees the water dripping, and he says to him, young lad, don't disobey your parents. He could see the sins falling off, the effect of what he was doing. And the next day he comes, the man, he sees another man doing wudu, and he says to him, young man, don't drink alcohol. Because he could see the effects of the wudu, right? And then the next man, he said, young man, don't fornicate, right? And this is too much, And this is something that is not only for the likes of Sayyidina Abu Hanifa. There are many. Because why? Because when you do sin, it has this odor, this stink, the stench that comes from that. The same as when you do good deeds, right? This is why if your heart is good, you see it on your face, you see it on people's faces, right? So then he says, Sayyidina Ja'far, and this is why wudu is so important. Like if you know the story of Sayyidina Abu Hassan Shadili, he was from Morocco. Again, he was looking for the Sayyid, the master of the time. So he travels from Morocco all the way to Iraq. And when he arrives in Iraq, he's looking for the qutb, the time, the pole, the master, the grand master of his time. And they said, oh, you find him in Morocco. And he just left Morocco. So he travels all the way back to Morocco. And he goes to the famous mountain. He goes right up and to see Sayyidina Abdul Salam al-Mashish. And he goes there and he sits with him. And he's done wudu beforehand. And when he goes there, Sayyidina al-Mashish says, go and do wudu. So Sayyidina Abdul, he goes all the way down. Sayyidina Abu Hassan, he goes all the way down. He does wudu again. And he goes all the way up again. And the Sheikh said, go and do wudu. They go all the way down again, and this happens. And then Sayyidina Abu Hassan al-Shadili understood he was talking about the qalb. This is where the wudu is, this. Then then he says, وَخَبَّأَ سَخَطَهُ فِي مَعْصِيَتِهِ. And then you have the displeasure of Allah. Then what is hidden? This is the second one. He says, وَخَبَّهُ سَخَطَهُ فِي مَعْصِيَتِهِ فَلَا تُحَقِّرَنَّ مِنْ مَعْصِي شَيْئًا فَعَلَّ أَن يَكُونَ فِيهِ سَخَطُ اللَّهِ. Don't you find the displeasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala where? In ma'asiyah, in disobedience. Right? So he said, don't undermine it. Don't say this is nothing. So for example, you might be invited to someone's house for dinner, for example. And the people have made time to make the food for you, and they clean the house and so on, and they dressed up, and you went there and you sat and you ate the food and you sat on the furniture and you spoke to them, you laughed with them and so on, and then you go home and then you mock their food. You mock the host. And so what's happened here is maybe the food wasn't good, but what was worse is what you have said. Your character. You have dishonored somebody. If you were to go and break the Kaaba bit by bit, okay? You say, wow, this is like to break down the Kaaba bit by bit is one thing. But more worse than that is if you break a heart of a believer. You smash down a heart of a believer. And then he says, وَخَبَّهَ أَوْلِيَاهُ فِي خَلْقِهِ فَلَا تُحَقِّرَنَّ مِنَ الْخَلْقِهِ أَحَدٍ. And he says, then in the creation of Allah is a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That you don't know that from who is a saint of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't know. You don't know, la ta'rifu. You don't know, he doesn't have a turban. Not every sheikh is a wali. Not every sheikh is a wali. So you may think, shuhada, who is this person? But because of him, this person that you don't know who this person is, the whole community is getting some type of protection because of this person. If you were to go to Damascus and iftah alayya, may Allah open Sham and Allahumma barik fi Sham and our Yaman, Allah give iftah to Sham and to Yemen and all the bilad al-Muslimin. There's a place, Souk Hamadiyya. Is any Damascus, any Shami here? Any from Damascus here? So you have Souk Hamadiyya, the main marketplace, and then you walk to Souk Hamadiyya, and then in there you got the main mosque, the Jami Mosque, the Ummi is there, right? And you have a place where, this is where Imam Ghazali went there, he did his retreat there as well, his khalwa. So he goes, when you go inside, there's a place where they pray, Musalli, and there is a sheikh that used to sit there, and he was a sheikh of Sham. Like he was a sheikh of Sham. Sayyidina Badr Hasni. He was a sheikh of Sham. And this is like the ulama will sit with him. So he's the sheikh of the ulama, right? So he would have durusis for the awam, for the normal people. Then he would have for khasas, just some special people, right? So once, and this is an imam, so you can look at Sayyidina Badr Hasni, he'd memorized the Quran, he'd memorized over 400 different mutun texts and books and poetry, and he had memorized Bukhari and Muslim and so on. He was like, old school, and super humble. And he was never seen sleeping, only leaning if he had to sleep for about 10 minutes, right? But always in ibadah. So one day, in a gathering like this, there used to be a guy used to come always, his student used to always come there, So the sheikh starts to give a dars, okay? And so he's giving the dars. And this man comes, black man comes right at the back, okay? Simple man, he comes, sits right at the back. And so the sheikh is giving the dars and he looks up and he sees him. And he says, Assalamu alaikum, Alain, tafadal, Alain, come. So everyone's turning around and looking at this black man, like who is this man? No one knew who this man is. So he comes in and he sits next to the sheikh. The sheikh says, okay, how are you? And he says, okay. And this guy is sitting there, student who's been there for a year is sitting there. Something is happening to him in the heart, right? Like he's thinking like, the sheikh has never asked me to sit next to him. Who is this guy? And this feeling started happening in the heart. So the sheikh continues talking. The next day, the dars starts again. The man comes again, sits right at the back. The same man, the black man, right at the back, sits there. Again, the sheikh is reading and he stops. Alain, Bismillah, Alain. So he comes in, he sits. Now, this guy already has got his feelings already. So now he's full on. He's like, what's happening here? Who is this person? Right? Who is this person? Right? He's getting really proper hasad now, full on hasad. So the sheikh talks to him and then he carries on giving the dars. He's burning now, this guy's really burning. On the third day, this man comes again. And when he comes, he sits right at the back and the sheikh calls him, come. And when he comes and sits next to him. But this time coffee is served. Coffee is coming. And this guy is burning now. So coffee is served and they give the coffee to the Sheikh Badr Hasni. Right? And when the coffee is given to Sheikh Badr Hasni, Sheikh al-Sham, he takes the coffee and gives it to the man next to him. Right? Now this guy is finished. Like, he's like, oh, this is like, This guy, he takes the coffee, he smiles and he turns around and he goes to that guy, Hada laka, this is for you. Right? And Sheikh Badr Hasni looked at him, smiled at him, and said to the young man, when you sit with the kings, mind how you move your hands, because you may have them chopped off if you do the wrong way. If you sit with the scholars, mind your tongue, because they know where you're coming from. But if you sit with the saints of Allah, mind your heart. Okay? So he realized that this is like, and this is like Sheikh Musa. He's a Somalian Sheikh, alhamdulillah, a great wali, alhamdulillah. So again, no one knew who this man was. Okay. Now, if you were in Medina, if you were in the time of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you were in Medina, walking in the streets of Medina, in the marketplace, you might see this black woman shopping. Okay. And this is not Barakah, and it's not the woman from last week's dars. But this is another black woman, and she's now in the. You think, who is this woman? Okay, and she's doing the shopping, and then she goes into a house which is near the masjid. And then she goes. She's not in the masjid, but now it's near the masjid. And so when she goes inside, she's free to go inside. She goes inside, and you bring the cameras in, and you're watching, and then you somehow manage to stay in that house, and you realize that the host or the owner of the house takes turns. So you know this black woman here is a khadima. She's a servant of someone, right? So you think, who is this person? But you see that the lady of the house, or the owner of the house, takes turns to clean the house. So one day the owner of the house is cleaning, and the next day the maid is. One day she's cooking, one day she's cooking. You think, whose house is this? This lady, the black woman, was actually she has a blue blood. She's from a royal family from Ethiopia, right? And when she was taken as a slave, she was brought into Medina, and Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he freed her. And when he freed her, she became the khadima of Lady Fatima alayhi salam. And her name is Fidda, right? And so she became the khadima. She served, she looked after Sayyidina Hassan and Sayyidina Hussein, and they'll take turns in looking after the house, right? And she's the famous one, Fidda, right? And if you saw, you thought, but she's the one that when Sayyidina Hassan and Sayyidina Hussein became ill, when they became ill, Sayyidina Ali went to Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to let him know that his grandchildren are not well, and they were young, very young. So Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they came to see Hassan and Hussein, and said to Sayyidina Ali that when they get better, take an oath that you're going to fast. So when they got better, Sayyidina Hassan, Sayyidina Hussein, who fasts? Sayyidina Ali fasts, Lady Fatima alayhi salam fasts, and Fidda, she fasts too. But not only that, she's the famous one. When they came to the house, the first day, there was time to fast, open the iftar. Who comes? This beggar comes, he's a hungry man. He comes and they give all the food to this person. The second day the person comes, and he's from a captive who's been released, he comes. And the third person is a traveler, and they give him all the food. And she's the one, after looking after Fatima, when she passed away, she looks after Sayyidina Hassan, she becomes the Khadima, Sayyidina Imam Hussein. She goes with Sayyidina Imam Hussein to where? To Karbala. In Karbala, she survives Karbala. She's arrested by Yazid's army and she's taken to Syria, right? And she's one of the great saints of our tradition. Fidda, you can look about her, radiyallahu ta'ala anha. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has hidden a lot of good people in our community. You'll be surprised how many people. And you have no idea who they are, inshallah ta'ala. So inshallah Allah give us khair and give us understanding. I really want you to pray for the Sheikh who passed away last week, Sheikh Muhammad Adam. I really want you to pray for this man, because his Sheikh was the Sheikh, his father. So his Sheikh was Habib Umar Smith, but his father was Habib Ahmed, who was really the Sheikh of Africa, right? He was given a cloak by the Ottomans, by the last Sultan was given to him, right? So please, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to raise Sheikh Muhammad Adam, inshallah. And he actually died is very similar time to his Sheikh passed away. Sheikh Umar, inshallah.